Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time. This is Masechet Sanhedrin. Excuse me. And today is our 13th lesson. Today we are going to be reviewing Daf 86 to 92. We have a lot to talk about today. I'm still a little hoarse. We have a lot of partying to do in Purim. So I apologize for my voice, but Be'ezrat Hashem, it'll be okay. Okay, Daf 86, we are still speaking about punishments, but by the middle of today's shir, we are going to move on from capital punishment and speak about another topic. So we will get to that halfway through. But first, we're going to continue speaking about people who are going to get capital punishment. And we ended last week speaking about a person who kidnaps another person, that they get capital punishment. So Daf 86 tells us that if you kidnap your own child, you are exempt. Or if a rabbi kidnaps his student, he's also exempt. Because they're always there, they're always in your house, or we're learning together, so it doesn't count as kidnapping. We said that when the capital punishment is only if you kidnap a Jew, but not for a non-Jew. Again, doesn't mean that it's okay. It just means that there is a different punishment. Now, we learn this from the 10 Commandments when it says, Lo tignov, do not steal. So the Gemara says, how do you know that lo tignov is don't kidnap, and it's not don't steal? Because, right, it's not about stealing money, because we look at the context, right? The context is you cannot murder, you cannot have, commit adultery. All of these things are capital punishment. Therefore, don't steal, right? Lo tignov in the 10 Commandments is really about kidnapping and not about stealing money. As we've seen previously, if someone steals, they have a different punishment, right? They have to return it, they have to pay double. But if you kidnap, then it is capital punishment. Okay, the transgression is not only kidnapping the person, but also for selling the person. And therefore, you need witnesses to testify that the person kidnapped, and also another set of witnesses that say that he sold the person as well. If one of those sets of witnesses become edim zomamim, again, if you remember, edim zomamim are witnesses that are lying in order to get someone convicted of something falsely, they get the punishment they were trying to convict the person in doing. In this case, they do not get killed because they're only one half of the testimony. Again, you need to testify for kidnapping and for selling. Okay. And we said again, kidnapping is the beginning of selling. And then maybe it's not that it's two separate cases, rather it's one whole thing. And therefore, maybe the first set of witnesses that testify about kidnapping, if they turn out to be false witnesses, maybe they would get that punishment. Okay, the next Mishnah is going to discuss the concept of zaken mamre. Zaken mamre literally means a rebellious elder or a rebellious sage. This is a person who rebels against the court. And now the Mishnah explains that there were 3 courts on the Temple Mount, one at the entrance, one in the courtyard, and one in Lishkat Hagazit, which was the hewn, how do you say Lishka? Not office. I can't think of the word right now. Right, the basically the court that was actually in the temple itself. And what happens? People come to a person comes to court and he says what he thinks is the law, and if they don't know what the law is, so then they go to the next court. Oh, thank you. Chamber of stone. Thank you. Chamber was the word I was looking for. And then they keep going up to higher courts till they get to the highest court, which is the Sanhedrin. And all the lower court judges go up with him to the Sanhedrin because they don't know the law either. And then the Sanhedrin decides what the law is. Then the person goes home, and if he just teaches his opinion, he's exempt. But if he instructs people to act like his opinion, then he is liable, right? He's rebelling against what the court said. If a student instructs people, he is exempt because, again, we called it zaken mamre, meaning it has to be an elder, someone who people look up to, someone who they want to listen to, who they revere, and not just a student. So if it's a student, it's not the same punishment. So now the Gemara explains there's a verse about this zaken mamre. He has to be an expert and he has to be a member of court. Again, we're not talking about just a person who goes against the law. We're talking about an actual scholar or judge who goes against the main court. And we're going to see in a minute, the reason is we don't want there to be machloket, right? We don't want there to be conflict in Jewish law. And therefore, if there is an edict, a law that's passed, that was given by the Sanhedrin, if somebody goes against that, again, a scholar who might cause, again, this upheaval, that person is going to get punished. So Daf 87 asks, what could they be arguing about? It's not any law. It has to be something very specific. So the Gemara mentions a whole list of things. An issue with the leap year, an issue with a law that is tradition from Moshe, about how we interpret psukim, about blood, about monetary issues, about capital issues, about leprosy, tzarat, vows, sota, egla arufa, pea, leket, and shichacha, which are the gifts that are given to poor people from the crops. And if he ruled against the court about these things, then he is a zaken mamre. And as we said, you have to go to Yerushalayim, to Harabait, and it talks about going up to Harabait, right? The concept of aliyah. And this basically shows that the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, is higher than everywhere else, and Israel is higher than anywhere else, which is funny because in Israel we basically have the lowest place on earth. But what's interesting is, again, one could say that we're talking about physical height, right, topographical, but one cannot really say that we're speaking more spiritually, right? When you come to Israel, when you move to Israel, you make aliyah, right? Not because you're going up into the mountains, though you could. I live in the mountains, but it's because you're elevated on a spiritual level. So now the Gemara explains, when is he liable? When he disagrees about a law that the punishment would be karet, right? Again, karet is the most stringent of punishments, and it has to be something that is written in the Torah, but we only really understand it because the rabbis explain the law. Excuse me. Sorry, one second. Okay, sorry. Okay, so now the Gemara goes through, if you remember a minute ago, I gave a whole list of laws that if he argues about those laws, he is liable for for capital punishment. So now the Gemara goes through how each one of these laws is, if you make a mistake about it, could the punishment would be correct. So I'll do a few of them. Maybe I won't do all of them because we have a lot of things to do today. But we talked about a leap year, right? So you need to know how to make a leap year. And if he disagrees with the Sanhedrin, you would be off, right, for the date of Pesach. And if you're off on the date of Pesach, right, as Pesach is coming up, if you would be off on the date of Pesach, the person might be eating chametz when they're only allowed to eat matzah, right? And therefore, you would be liable, the person would be liable for karet. Therefore, this is something that is very severe, and therefore, we want to make sure that we don't have disagreements about these very important laws. Again, we said blood. What is blood? Right, the blood of nida. Again, we don't want a couple to have relations when she could be in nida, right, when she could be menstruating. And therefore, if he does disagree with their ruling and they have relations, again, it is a very, very stringent punishment. The same thing with monetary laws or capital punishments. In these issues, and a few of the other issues, the issue is if you tell the person that they're liable to pay, but really they weren't, so then they're taking money, right? Then the person gets money, which really isn't theirs. And if they take that money and they betroth a woman with it, so then they think that they're married, but they really aren't. And then this will cause a lot of issues of, again, forbidden relationships. Or an issue is that if you use that money to use it for something sanctified, also we have an issue of karet. We also have the issue with sarat, with leprosy. And then let's say the person thinks that they are not impure and they go into the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, but really they were impure, they were tameh. Now you get karet. Daf 88 talks about also sota, right? Again, the woman who is suspected of having an affair. And again, if there is an issue where he disagrees with the court, it could lead to a punishment of karet. The same thing with the different laws of gifts that you give to the poor. If he says the wrong law and then the poor people take it and really it wasn't theirs, so it's as if they stole it, and then they betrothed a woman, again, karet, right? We have this problem. Now, we're going to be, again, like we've seen before, we don't really want to give capital punishment, so we're going to be very specific about what the case is. So let's say, right, this zaken mamre says, I got this law as it was passed down to me from my teachers. I learned this from my teachers. And the Sanhedrin rules also, they have a tradition from their teachers. Or if he says, look, I am very smart and this is what I think the law is. And they say, look, we're very smart and this is what the law is. In all of these cases, he is not a zaken mamre because the conflict is on the same level. Tradition, right? If I learned this and you learned that, okay, so we disagree because we each learned something else. Or if I think it's this way and you think it's this way, okay, we disagree. When is it a zaken mamre? If he says, I think this is the reason, right? Because like from my brain, this is what I decided. And they say, no, we have a tradition that this is the law. And if he now teaches his own, right, his own reasoning and his law, that is zaken mamre, right? He is rebelling against the Sanhedrin, right? And I think that this is it's very important to recognize, and we have seen this before, right? The rabbis are trying to create a system. Now, there is a system of checks and balances, right? There are many courts, there are many judges, right? The Sanhedrin has many members, but if ultimately the great court, right, or what we would call the Supreme Court, makes a ruling, that's it. Now, even if you think you're smarter, right, I'm sorry, but you're not smarter than the 70 people who are sitting in the Sanhedrin, right? So it's very important to recognize that we're not talking about hubris, right? We're talking about creating a halachic legal system where, again, different opinions are valid, but if there is a ruling, that is the ruling. And we've seen this throughout the Talmud. We've learned a few stories about this, that even if you're very smart, if the majority says one way, you have to accept that way. The Gemara talks about, can the court forgive the zaken mamre? What if he does do it, say something against the Sanhedrin, and then he says, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. Can they say, oh, okay, fine, you're sorry, it's okay? So one opinion is yes, right? They can forgive him. Another opinion is no, right? Meaning we don't want there to be conflict in Israel. And therefore, even if he's sorry, right? Okay, so he'll do tshuva, but they have to uphold this this law. And the Gemara talks about, like, originally there weren't disagreements in the courts, but eventually there were. And from the time of the study halls of Hillel and Shammai, right? If you remember, Hillel and Shammai argued. They respected each other very well. They really respected each other. But when their schools got bigger, right, it created a lot of tension. And therefore, right, the Gemara calls it became like almost two Torahs, right? And unfortunately, we see a lot of conflict in Israel, even today, which is very challenging. And you can see already, 2,000 years ago, they're saying we have to be careful that there isn't too much conflict in Israel and that there's respect for one another. Okay, the next Mishnah tells us that for zaken mamre, it has to be where we're talking about also a rabbinic law that is stringent. And some say that if he says, let's say, you don't have to put on tefillin, so then that is exempt, because obviously you have to put on tefillin. But if he says the tefillin need 5 compartments, now he is liable, because he added to that. Right? It has to be something that comes from the Torah, but only something that is explained by the rabbis. And the only thing that it could be is tefillin. The Gemara offers some other laws that it could be about, but rejects it. Daf 89, the Mishnah says that he doesn't get executed in his city or in Yavne, right? Yavne is where the center of religious life moved after Jerusalem. However, right, he has to be brought to Jerusalem, and you have to wait till a holiday to kill him so that everybody can see, right? There's a verse that says, Kol Yisrael yishma'u v'yira'u, right? All of Israel is going to hear about this, and they're going to be afraid, right? and therefore you have to wait for them to see it, again, because we want everyone to know conflict is bad. The other opinion is no, you don't, you're not allowed to delay the execution. You have to execute him right away, and then you send out letters to different communities to tell them this is what happened. Okay, the Gemara says that everyone needs to hear and fear. They don't necessarily have to see it, but they have to hear about it. And the Gemara says that there are 4 people that we announce that they get killed, right? Again, so that people will hear who are these people? A mesite, right? A person who tries to get other people to worship idols. A ben sorer or more, right? The rebellious child. The zaken mamre, our case. And edim zomemim, again, the witnesses that are false, and they're trying to they're making up stories about the defendant. Okay, the next Mishnah is going to talk about a false prophet. So what is a false prophet? It's a person who says something that he never heard, right, from God, or that it was told to somebody else and he repeats it, right? He pretends that he got the prophecy, but really his neighbor got the prophecy. Either way, this person is liable. But if he really is a prophet, but he suppresses his prophecy, or he disregards the words of the prophecy, or he transgresses his own prophecy, this is going to be, his punishment is going to be mita bidei shamayim, right? God is going to kill him. It's not capital punishment. Another person is who's going to get killed is a person who gives a prophecy in the name of an idol. Even if he gives a real law, if he says it in the name of idolatry, he gets, again, strangulation. All of these people get chenek, which is strangulation. A third person is a person who else gets chenek, gets strangulation, a person who sleeps with a married woman. Even if she hasn't slept with her husband yet, but she is married, right? Like in between the wedding and the first night. And edim zomemim, who, right, again, these false witnesses who are testifying against the daughter of a Kohen that she had, that she committed adultery. The daughter, if it's true, would get burnt, would get sreifa, but the false witnesses would only get chenek. And the Gemara is going to explain all of these things. Okay, so the Gemara says 3 people get capital punishment and 3 people get killed by God, right? And this is based on a verse. And this is, right, they say this is like Sidkiah ben Kenana, who gave a prophecy that he didn't hear. And it seems that like the spirit of Navot came and tricked him into giving false prophecy. But he should have known, because at the time, all of the prophets, right, 400 people said the same prophecy. And he should have known, and now you'll know if you ever get any prophecy, God does not give the same prophecy to different people. Meaning, if 400 people say, last night we had a dream that, the sun is going to go backwards 3 hours, it's false, because God always gives different, again, it could be the same message, but the image, the prophecy itself is always going to be different. Hananiah ben Azor said a prophecy that was said to Yirmiyahu, but he like changed it a little bit, and because of that, right, he was going to get punished. Right, the prophets of the Baal get killed because they prophesize in the name of Baal, who was right a false god. Right, Yonah is an example, right? The Gemara is going through the examples of all the things we mentioned in the Mishnah. Yona, right? Jonah is an example of someone who suppresses their prophecy, right? So that's not capital punishment. Ido did not listen to his own prophecy, right? Because he says you shouldn't eat. And then as he's going down, someone says to him, oh, I just got this prophecy that says you can eat. And he did, and then he actually gets killed. If you don't give over your prophecy, you get punished, you get lashes, not capital punishment. So the Gemara says, how do you know that he didn't give over his prophecy? Like, how would we know about it? So the Gemara says, oh, don't worry. When God gives one person a prophecy, he also tells other prophets in the area that they should know that he got a prophecy, and therefore they're going to warn him that they better tell their prophecy. Okay, the Gemara says, but wait, maybe God will take back the prophecy, like with Yonah, he changes his mind, he takes it back and he doesn't tell Yonah, but Hashem does say to him, Nineveh, right, the city is going to be turned over. So it could mean destroyed, but it could also mean that the punishment will be overturned. So he wasn't really contradicting the prophecy. So now the Gemara says, how do we know if a person is really a prophet? So he is going to give you a sign, and if he already proved himself, he doesn't need to give another sign, right? Like Abraham and Eliyahu, they prove themselves already. They don't have to prove themselves again. And since we're talking about Abraham, the Gemara talks about Abraham going to the Akedah when he's going to sacrifice when he's going to sacrifice Yitzchak. And here the Gemara talks about right. It basically gives a lot of midrashim stories about that lead up to the binding of Isaac to Akedat Yitzchak. That basically the Satan was trying to get Abraham in trouble, right? He says to Hashem, how do you know that Abraham is gonna, sacrifice his son that he loves, right? And the Satan tries to stop Abraham on the way. Right, he says like, oh, I just heard that actually you don't need to sacrifice him, right? But obviously Abraham didn't listen to him, and he goes and sacrifices. And he goes and sacrifices. Well, he goes to sacrifice Yitzchak. Obviously, he does not sacrifice Yitzchak. Okay, now we have a machloket. If a prophet who subverts a city to do idolatry, does he get stoning? Does he get skila or chenek? Now, what's the idea? We now have two different types of sins, right? One is a false prophet, and one is someone who seduces, right? Who entices people to worship idolatry. And therefore, the question is, what punishment is he going to get? So there's a machloket, which one is he like? And then the Gemara discusses, again, what is the false prophet trying to do? If he's trying to get people to worship idolatry, so then he's going to get capital punishment. But if he's going to tell them to do other sins, maybe he would not get capital punishment. Maybe he would get a different punishment. And again, the machloket is, if he is a false prophet, does he get stoning or chenek or strangulation? Okay, if a prophet says you don't need to keep a mitzvah temporarily, then you can believe him, right? Except for idolatry. I don't care if he is right, proven that he's a good prophet or not. He shows you a sign. Either way, if he tells you to worship idolatry, you are not allowed to listen to that person. Okay, with that, we are going to finish the 10th chapter, and now we're going to begin the 11th chapter. This is a very famous chapter in Sanhedrin. It is referred to as Perek Chelek, which is the name of the chapter. Right, it starts with Chelek. We'll see in a minute why. It's called the chapter of Chelek, of a part. What are we talking about? This whole chapter speaks about the next world. What does it mean? We're going to see different terms. It's very deep, it's very esoteric. I'm going to explain the words, but we don't understand all of the concepts or how it's going to work or when it's going to work or what it's going to look like. But I will explain what the Gemara says. So there are a few terms that we're going to use. Okay, so one is Yimot HaMashiach, right? The days of the Messiah, right? This is when the Moshiach comes. He is going to rule. There's going to be a temple, a Beit HaMikdash. All the nations are going to believe in God. There's going to be peace. Okay, so that's Yimot HaMashiach. And it seems to be even though it's a futuristic concept, it seems to be very natural, right? We have a leader, we have a Beit HaMikdash, we have different nations. So that's the times of Mashiach. Gan Eden, right? The Garden of Eden is a reward for people who do good in this world. And it's a world for our souls. It is a spiritual world, not a physical world. Gehenom, right, which sometimes is translated as hell, but it's a place where the soul goes for punishment. And again, it's very spiritual, right? There's no body there. Okay, the next two terms are a little bit more amorphous. We're not exactly sure how they fit into the things that I just mentioned, right? So we have the concept of Olam Haba, which literally means, right, the next world or the world to come. This is what we would call the afterlife. This is also what we call Tchiyat HaMetim, the resurrection of the dead, right? When everybody will come back to life. And then we have Atid Lavo, which also is in the future, which is like messianic, right? The messianic era. Okay, so let's begin. So the Mishnah tells us all Jews have a portion, a chelek, right? That's why it's called Perek Chelek. All Jews have a portion in the world to come. There are people who do not have a portion. Who are these people? People who say there is no Tchiyat HaMetim, right? So if you don't believe in the resurrection of the dead, okay, from now on I'm going to call it Tchiyat HaMetim because it's shorter than resurrection of the dead. So people who don't believe in Tchiyat HaMetim are not going to come back. I was watching a show that has nothing to do with this, but it was like a show about like the times of the Greeks with paganism, and this woman says, "Oh, I don't believe in the afterlife," and then she dies, and she's online to get to the afterlife, and then they pull her out of line, and she says, "Wait, I want to go to the afterlife," and they say, "No, you don't get to go because you didn't believe in it in the first place." So it's literally this. That's this Gemara. I don't know if they got it from this Gemara, but right, if you don't believe in it, you don't get it. Also, if you don't believe that the Torah is from God, you also don't get a portion in the next world. If you're an apikores, we'll see what that means, not this week, but next week. If you read from external books, again, we'll see what that is next week. If you say incantations over wounds, or if you say God's real name instead of the way we say it nowadays. The Mishnah tells us that there were 3 kings and 4 regular people who lost their portion of the world to come. Who are the kings? Yeravam, Achav, Menashe. We're going to go through all of them, right? They were terrible kings, so they lost their portion. Or maybe Menashe did tshuva, he repented, and therefore he does get a portion. Who are the 4 regular people? Bilam, Doeg, Achitophel, and Gehazi. They all lost their portion. And again, next week, we're going to talk about all of these people. Okay, so now the Gemara says, again, if you deny Tchiyat HaMetim, you do not get it. And the Torah says, the Gemara says, this is what we call midah keneged midah. What does that mean? God does, right? You get punished in the way that you transgressed, right? I guess in English you would say you get what you deserve, right? So if you don't believe in Tchiyat HaMetim, then you don't get Tchiyat HaMetim, right? So this is learned from Elisha. There's a story where he prophesies that tomorrow there's going to be a lot of food, and there was a general who basically said, "What are you talking about? I don't believe you." And then in the end, there was food, and he gets trampled at the gate. So it says like at the sha'ar, but the day before they were talking about the market value, the sha'ar of the food. So, right, so he gets killed at the gate because they were talking about market value, which in Hebrew, both of those words are sha'ar. A verse, okay, so now, and we'll continue, we'll see more, right? Everyone wants to understand, how do you know that there's going to be Tchiyat HaMetim, right? Interestingly enough, there's no verse in the Torah that says, right? And God told Moses, in the end of days, everybody's going to come out of the grave, and it's going to be a big party, right? There's no verse like that. So the rest of today's class is going to be different rabbis bringing different verses that hint to the fact that there will be Tchiyat HaMetim. Why do we need so many? Because I said, none of them really are 100% a proof that there will be Tchiyat HaMetim, right? And again, I think this is a very deep concept. Obviously, it's a very deep concept, but I think the fact that there's no one proof is why it's called a belief, right? We believe in Tchiyat HaMetim. Why? Because it's never been proven, right? You don't have to believe in something that can be proven, right? I'm drinking water. I know it's water. You don't have to believe me, right? You know it's water, right? That's not a belief. A belief is something that I'm not 1,000% sure about, right? And therefore, I think the Gemara is trying to show that, yes, I'm going to give you hints or signs that this is going to happen, but I'm never going to prove it to you 100%. And I think that's the beauty, right? That's why it's called a belief and not a, scientific fact. Okay, but we'll use science and we'll use other things to prove it as well. Okay, so there's a verse that says that Aaron will come back and the people are going to give him truma, right? This proves that it's going to be Tchiyat HaMetim. The Gemara says, oh, maybe not, because they're supposed to give truma to a priest who's like Aaron, right? He's upstanding, he's good, he's learned, right? You're not supposed to give it to somebody who does not know the laws. Maybe we learn it from another verse, right? God says that he would give Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov a portion in Israel. How could he give them a portion in Israel if they are not here now when we live in Israel? Don't worry, they're going to come back to life. Okay, another statement, right? There are three sources for Tchiat HaMetim. One from the Torah, right? Moshe was told that he was going to get up. So that's from the Torah. From the Navi, from the prophet, Ezekiel is told that he will rise up. And in Shira Shirim and Ketuvim, in the third part of Tanakh, it says that the dead people's lips are going to move. How could dead people's lips, right? They don't have lips. How are they going to move? Don't worry, they're going to come back to life. Now, of course, each one of these things can be disproven, and that's why it's not really a proof. From another verse, right? We actually say this verse when before we read from the Torah, the congregation says, "Ve'atem hadvikim b'Hashem Elokeichem chayim kulchem hayom." Right? You are all going to cling to God, and you will all be alive. Right? Today, what does it mean? You will all be alive today. It means that God will resurrect everyone eventually, right? And God also knows what's going to happen in the future. And again, right, these are proofs, but as we said, not really proofs. Right, Queen Cleopatra was discussing with Rabbi Meir Tchiat HaMetim, and she actually says, I believe that there is Tchiat HaMetim, but I have a question for you. When people come back, are they going to come back clothed or naked, right? How do they stand up from the grave? So Rabbi Meir explains, you should learn from wheat. Why? How do you plant wheat? You take off its clothing, right? You take off all the shell, right? And you plant it naked, but when it grows clothed. What does that mean, right? The wheat grows with the bran and everything like covering the seeds. So he says, right, wheat is planted, right, put in the ground naked and comes out clothed, but the Jewish people, right, we make sure that you bury the dead in shrouds. Therefore, obviously, they're going to get up wearing clothing. And when I was teaching this to my friends, right, they were discussing the fact that it's Cleopatra, right, the Egyptian practice was that you get buried with everything, right? Within fancy clothing, you get buried with everything so that you can get up in the next world with all of your possessions. So it's interesting to think if maybe this conversation was connected to that. Daf 91, the Caesar asked Rabban Gamliel, again, these are all like, right, the rulers of the time are asking the sage of the time, please explain to me these concepts, right? So Caesar asks Rabban Gamliel, how do you know that there's going to be Tchiat HaMetim, right? How could it be? The body decomposes. So Caesar's daughter actually says, Rabban Gamliel, I'll answer this. I know the answer, right? She says, if God can create man out of water, which is basically semen, right? Out of something very small and insignificant. So don't you think God can recreate man from dust, which is, I guess, less than, right? Not as original as like from a drop, right? From a drop of water. So don't worry, God can create man out of dust. Or maybe she answered him, right? Just like man can fix glass when it breaks into pieces, so too God can recreate man when we decompose into pieces, right? Or, right, look at these mountains, right? You go up on the mountain, maybe you'll see one snail, but I don't know about outside of Israel, but in Israel, when it rains, you go outside and there's snails all over, right? And they seem to come out of nowhere, right? They come out of the ground. So just like God can make the snails come out of the ground, don't worry, he can make people come out of the ground, right? It's not such a big deal. Okay, from here, we're going to have people who are going to argue with the Jews, right? So one is people who think that they're going to die and they're not going to come back. They are called sinners. Then we have a discussion of different nations coming to Alexander the Great and claiming that they get a portion in Israel. Sound familiar? Right, so the Africans claim that they want Israel because they are descendants from Canaan, and right, Canaan lived in Eretz Canaan, which is Israel. And then we have this Jew, his name is Geviah, and he says, oh, I'll argue, right? I can argue against him. And basically, what does he say? He says, look, the Torah says, right? Basically, they're using the Torah as proof that they have a portion. And then he says, what are you talking about? The Torah says that Canaan is going to be the slaves of the Jews. And if you're the slaves of the Jews, everything that you own goes to us. Therefore, even if you had a portion, it goes to the Jewish people, and it's ours. And they could not refute him. And basically, they run away and they leave all their crops for the Jews. And it was Shemitah, and everyone had food to eat. Another time, an Egyptian came and said, we want all the gold of the Jewish people, because you know what? When they left Egypt, they said that they were borrowing the gold, and they never came and gave it back. So all the gold they have really belongs to us. So then, again, Geviah says, wait a minute, Egyptians, didn't you enslave the Jewish people? So basically, they worked for you for 400 years or 210 years. You owe them back pay for 210 years. So I don't think we owe you any money, right? And basically, they didn't have an answer, and they ran away. Then the children of Ishmael came, and Keturah, and they say, we get a portion of Israel because, right, Abraham was our father, and we get a portion. And again, Geviah says, wait a minute, the Torah says that Abraham gave you presents, right, your ancestors, and sent you out of Israel because Yitzchak is the one who got Israel. And they basically had nothing to say, right? So as you see, from the river to the sea has been going on for thousands of years. Okay, Rebbe and Antoninus, again, great sage, leader, have a lot of discussions. He's the emperor. They discuss many things. So Antoninus asks, how could it be that God is going to punish us in the future, right? If we're made up of a body and a soul, right? Because the body can say, the soul made me do it, and the soul can say, the body made me do it. Rebbe gives a mashal, a parable of a king who has two guards. One is lame and one is blind, and he figures, oh, these are going to be great guards. They're not going to be able to get the fruit, but they're smart. And they say, oh, the lame guy should climb on the blind guy, and then they can pick the fruit. So the Gemara says the same thing here. You're right that the body and the neshama can't be judged separately, but if you put them together, that's how we're going to be judged. And then nobody can argue with the other. There's a verse that says that people with defects or blemishes are going to come back with their blemishes. And there's another verse that says that they won't. So the Gemara says they don't contradict each other. Basically, people are going to come back with their defects or blemishes, but when they come back to life, then God is going to heal them. Then we talk about other verses that prove that there's going to be Tchiyat HaMetim, right? We say every day, Az Yashir Moshe Ubnei Israel, right? Then they will sing, right? Or he will sing Yashir. What does it mean he will sing? In the future, right? We say, Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha Od Yehalelucha Stella, right? Again, they're going to praise you in the future. When is the future? in the future in Tchiyat HaMetim. Okay, Daf 92, more verses that prove Tchiyat HaMetim. And then we have these many statements by Rebbe Elazar. A person who leads with gentleness will merit to lead in the next world. There are things that are so great that when they're mentioned in the Torah, God's name is mentioned before them and after them, right? And this is knowledge and sanctity. And these things are very, very important. There are three things that are never satisfied, right? The grave, the womb, and the earth. What does that mean? They take things in and they give things out, right? So again, Tchiyat HaMetim, a womb, right? Baby, earth, when you plant things, right? And then it sprouts. So I think it's like a cool, comparison of these things. Then the Gemara tells us that once righteous people come back to life, they're going to live forever. This is based on a verse. And even there's a point, which we didn't learn yet, but we're going to learn, that God is going to like destroy the whole world, and then people are going to come back. So what about these tzaddikim, these righteous people that are already back? What's going to happen? They're going to like fly over the earth while the world is being like destroyed and then created again, and then they'll come back. The Gemara now talks about, wait a minute, but in Ezekiel, right, the prophecy of the dry bones, where he brings back people, they actually die. They come back, they sing praise to God, and then they die. So one opinion is they die right away, but another opinion is actually that they move to Israel and they get married and they have children and they lead regular lives, meaning they don't die right away. Who were these people that Yechezkel resurrected? So we have different opinions. One is they were the children of Ephraim who escaped Egypt because they thought it was time for the redemption, but they were wrong and they basically got killed. So maybe it's that they were the ones that were resurrected, or maybe it's people who rejected Tchiyat HaMetim, or maybe it was people who didn't do any mitzvot at all, or people who were from the plain of Dura. The Gemara explains that during the time of King Nebuchadnezzar, who was terrible, he threw these three people into the furnace, right? Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They were thrown into the furnace and they were saved. So during this time, Hashem sent Yechezkel to revive these people from the plain of Dura, and their bones get up and they basically slap Nebuchadnezzar in the face, and he starts to sing praises to God, right? He sees the miracle. And since we're talking about miracles, on that day, 6 different miracles happened with the furnace, right? It basically rises up, and then people could see what's happening. And then again, the Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah are not consumed by the fire. And then the idol falls, and then 4 people from the court are burnt. So what's going on? Just to finish up, the Gemara says that Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah do not bow down to this idol. And then Nebuchadnezzar gets so mad that he says, we're going to kill them. But they are saved. And then the Gemara ends for today by saying that even if you're about to be executed, which I think goes back to what we've been discussing for the past number of months, even if you're going to be executed, you should not lose who you are. You should still be, you should be dignified. You should not change who you are, right? And it's proven from Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah that even though they were about to get killed, they stood there with dignity, and in the end, they were saved. And we are going to pick this up next week. We're going to pick this up next week to continue talking about the story of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And we're going to continue speaking about, again, Tchiyat HaMeitim and the next world, and what that might look like in our limited understanding of what these things are. Okay, I'm happy to open up to questions, though I don't know if I will have any answers, but go ahead.
I understood most of it. I'll keep my mouth shut.
Again, these are very, I think it's actually a beautiful way to end this Masechet. Now that I'm like thinking about it, I think that's the point. But now that I'm thinking about it out loud, right? We spent, 90 pages talking about how people were going to get killed. So we're going to end the Masechet on a positive note of, even if people get punished in this world, there is the next world, right? And I think that those people who think that this world is the only world that there is, that's very sad, because, as we all know, this world is very complicated and confusing, and there's a lot of darkness in this world. So I think that those of us who believe that the next world is full, I skipped a little bit, but the Gemara talks about the light, the eternal brightness of the next world, right? It's a world of all spirituality and goodness. That's something to look forward to. And it's something that should give us, hope and inspiration. So I think that really, I mean, I don't know if that's what the rabbis were intended, but for me, it seems to be very fitting that that's the way we're going to finish this Masechet. But more than that, I cannot explain. Yes, Ilanit.
Yeah, I had dropped in a note, but it's probably just silly. I don't know. It just, as soon as we got to chapter 11 and you said, this is so famous, this is Perek Hailek, and etc. And then I've been so busy today, and I had read something quickly about the Torah portion we're in right now here in the USA, getting ready, second from the end. And it said there's that, and there's Perek Hailek, etc. I just remember that, and I was just wondering if that's something special about this time of year, or right now where we refer to this part of the Talmud and I didn't know about it. Is there any custom I'm missing, or?
Not that I am familiar with, but meaning this week's portion speaks about the building of the Mishkan. I'm not sure what the connection is, but either maybe one of the psukim that we used to prove Tchiyat HaMeitim is from this week's parsha. I'm not, I don't know. I will look into that. It's not something that
me too. I'll keep my eyes open now just to see, because
okay.
I'm always learning, and Judaism is so vast, and there's so many cultures, so many things, and I just thought, oh, is this something else everybody talks about, and I'm out of it. So
okay, let me know if you do. I'll also look into it. I'm not sure. It could be that as we continue this perek, again, we have about 2 more weeks to the end of this Masechet, so maybe we'll see a connection. I'm not sure, but if you see a connection, email me, let me know.
It's a new beginning. Another one, remember? Passover, a new beginning. It's
true. Also, yes. Very fitting for this time. I mean, I can connect it to the time of Passover for sure, right? Like you said, new beginning, redemption, a creation of a new nation, a new world, all of those things for sure. But I'm not sure about this parsha in particular, but let's look. We'll see. Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for your flexibility. I know it's not our usual night, but I appreciate that. And next week we will meet at our regular day and time on Wednesday night. So wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and
Shabbat
Shabbat
shalom.
Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was very beautiful.
Yeah, it was.
Thank you.
It was very uplifting. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
uplifting.
Be safe and timely
Thank
message
you.
right now.
Thank you. Amen. Thank you.